Hi, this is Pasi from Taipua. This is the topic of my presentation and demo today. Just a note that I'll be quite quick with some of the slides, so if you want to read more carefully, just pause the video. This is a very brief introduction to our company's current customers and the industries that we're involved with. This is a definition of large capital investment project, which is kind of a central of the topic today. Typical areas of industries are listed here. This slide really underlines the poor performance of capital projects that we have seen some recent years. Understanding requirements can really make a difference. So if we think of the starting phase of a project, it really determines the value, meaning that poor versus good execution really doesn't have a big difference. On the other hand, if the requirements are analyzed properly, then the value is much higher, and it doesn't really matter, again, if the execution is poor or good, but the difference comes from the early phase, from the project definition, and that's where the project is really determined to success or not. This picture shows some different actors in these projects. So there is a chain of different actors, and of course on the side of these there are standards, laws and regulations, and also from the contractor point of view there are some policies affecting the contractor. And this is the selected point of view for our demo today. And if we think of the different requirements and the flow of the information between these actors, we see that the customer or the facility owner gives requirements to project contractor, who then specifies their internal requirements and specifications based on that, and furthermore they can then apply them and derive more detailed requirements for suppliers and contractors. In general, when you receive an invitation to tender, does it feel like this? There are some common problems that we have seen taking place in these situations. So, if we think of digitalization, it changes everything, everywhere. And Office applications have been around for 30 years. And during that time, really, there hasn't been many major breakthroughs how the documents or spreadsheets are processed. So, the implication is that there is really a need to a requirements-driven, modern and digitalized process. And the solution that we are showing today is Siemens Polarion. What it really is, here are some facts about the solution. And if we think of different process areas that are typically taken care of by this solution, are shown here on the left hand side. And today we are mostly talking about requirements and specifications. To define our scope today, the process areas that we are concentrating on today are really the left-hand side of the famous V model. We could do much more, but we are concentrating on these two process areas first. Then we also look at some of the change management, and on the side of these things we get to see some metrics reports and risk management. So let's start with the first process area. This is a very brief overview of the process that we are seeing just in a minute. So we import documents into Polarion tool, and then we do some magic there, marking some objects from the document, and then we start processing those objects and kind of simulating different experts taking part into the process. like this. And looking at some reports what are generated automatically out of the process, so that we can make sure that the everything is under control. And in Polarion, there is a workflow that governs the whole thing. So if we look at the first step, is marking sections of a document as contract items. So let's now go and see what it looks like in Polarion. This is a web-based tool, so I just log into the tool, and here is our project automatically opened, kind of the recent project where I was. Here on the left-hand side there's a navigation panel, so if I change something it reflects here on the right-hand side, which is called the working area. So starting here from the project dashboard, showing the current status of things. But let's go to the document which I was supposed to work on. I already imported that document into Polarion just to save some time. So here it is. This Annex A specification, that's part of the contract or contract requirements from our customer. If we look at this document, it really seems like an ordinary document, but it's here now on the web-based tool. And I have already worked a bit on this document, and I show what happens, how to mark those different objects in this document. For example, here, if we think that this is one of the requirements or contract items coming from the customer that we want to specifically process, I just mark that as a work item, which is now called a contract item. And I can mark some properties for that. So let's pick up a discipline for that, and I will assign this to myself for simplicity. And whenever I click save here on this document, we see that it's actually transformed into a object which has a unique identifier here. And nothing is really actually changed here in the document. It still stays here in the document as well, but it's also at the same time it's an individual object in the database. So let's mark some more. For example, this could be one of the requirements that I want to control here. And let's now pick two disciplines for this. Yeah, let's take this as well as one of the contract items. So let's say that this is project management, quality related, and I will just assign this to myself as well. Okay. So if we take a look at the workflow, I emphasize that this is only a sample workflow, and it's really easy to configure this according to your way of working. Here in our sample workflow, the next step would be that this responsible person, me, analyzes the items that have been assigned to him. So as myself, I can go to my personal home page called My Polarion, and I see some of the items that have been assigned to me for my investigation. So this is something that I would need to analyze. So let's open one of these items just from a link here, and this shows you some more things from the of the work item. So it's really an object in a database which contains the paragraph that we took from the document, and it also contains some metadata and other properties. But maybe it would be more useful to look this at the document context and to process it here. So my job now is to analyze this item and to determine the contactor response. And in this case, we would comply to this, say that it's a minor of importance, and would set that to ready for review, like that. Let's also process the other one, this one here, and say that we put that to review as well with major importance, and saying that we would actually like to propose a deviation for that, and say that instead of 5 years, we would like to have 3 years guarantee. Okay. Going back to my Polarium page shows that I now have only one item outstanding, and let's click that one as well. If I want, I can also process these items individually here with this view. So let's have the importance of major for this, and say that we would comply to this. But actually, I'm a bit unsure about this, because I know that there is another expert in our organization called John Requirements, so I can actually ask specific comments from John on this topic. So I'll just say that like this. Now, in the workflow of processing these contract items, we are here in step 3, which allows us to also facilitate a whole review. What I'm doing next, I'm looking at how John Requirement sees the tool from his perspective. So logging into the tool as John Requirement and going into the My Polarium page of John. So he sees that there's actually one item for his review. So let's click this open. And now John thinks that it's also better to see that in the whole context. So he opens the document and sees that, okay, it's here. And actually, it's very neat to do the approval commenting with this kind of view, saying that, okay, I will actually decline this, saying that we don't want to comply to this. And the comment would be like this, and it's there. Going back to my own view, I'll just open the document as well. So, like I said, we can facilitate a review with this tool quite easily. So if we're looking at all the approvals, we can see that, okay, there's actually for this item, there is one disapproval from John. So he didn't like this idea of complying. The next step in the workflow can really be an internal review. At the same time, we can also add some more information into the items if we want. We can, of course, work with this document view, but it's also possible to switch to a table view showing only the items from this document. For example, we can easily see the different responses that the people in our team are proposing. Let's look at the one here, and actually looking at the comment by John, determining that, okay, let's actually go for a deviation here, and let's also add our response here. Now, let's suppose that we have dealt with all the contract items, so that we can say that we just say that they have all been approved internally. For all our items, we concluded that the workflow is now here in this status. The next step would be discussing with the customer. What we can also do is to derive risks and tasks, for example, directly based on the analyzed requirements. Let's pick up this one here, and let's derive a risk for this, saying that there is an environmental compliance risk. And we see that it's by default it's assigned to me. So going back to my Polarium page, I have no outstanding contract items anymore, but here I have one risk. To conclude our process area number 1, I'm going back to this dashboard, showing that, okay, these graphs are reflecting the real status here, and showing also some statistics, and we can also display the risks here on this dashboard. Now I'm going to see the process area number 2. More detailed specifications can be derived directly out of the contract items or customer requirements. So in other words, we can clean the requirements of irrelevant things for the project and the supply chain. We can also rely on existing specifications, just reusing the existing items and linking them to contract items. In Polarium, specification is a collaborative effort again. If there already are some requirements in an existing specification, we can link them directly to upstream and say which customer or contract items they are derived from. For the next step, I will actually change the view a bit, putting these documents side by side. Here on the left-hand side, there's the specification from the customer, and here on the right-hand side, our more detailed specification based on that. So let's say that this requirement here is actually derived or resulting from this customer requirement here. Just saving that link by saving the right-hand side document, and looking at the work item properties, we see that the link was actually formed. We can also see that the table here is updated. Another case is that if there really are no existing specifications, we can derive new requirements based on the original requirements. Take for example this one. We see that there are no linked items beneath this one, so we can create one just here. And let's not add any content at this time, just to give you an example. And if we open the document, we see that it ended up into the specification document, and it also gets a link to the contract item. What is now particularly useful is that whoever is working with this design specification, he can always see where these requirements are coming from. So, for example, this one, it has its basis on customer requirement or contract item, which can be opened here. And if we want to see some more context, it's easy because we can see the whole document where they are coming from. Let's now go and see a bit of change management. An overview again. So it's a possibility that whenever there is a change, it's managed with a change request item in Polarium. Its purpose is to manage the change and document the decision and its implications. Change analysis is quite clear if there's a change of requirements. Schedule and cost impacts can be analyzed, so this really supports the management of the whole contract and getting paid for the change work. Once a change is approved, there's an assured way of propagating the change all the way to the impacted items. Let's create one change request for an example. For example here, for the selected item. Suppose the customer suggests this kind of a change. Instead of this, saying that there's a time impact for the project. So now the change request is there. For this change request, there really is a chain of requirements. Suppose this change request gets approved. Again, this workflow can be really easily adjusted to the way of working that is desired. Going to the highest level requirement that gets changed, let's just create an artificial change here for simplicity and say that it's save and suspect, which then results in so-called suspect flag on the child item downstream, which indicates that there is a change that needs to be taken into account. So let's suppose we take that into account accordingly, and then we can just remove the suspect flag from here. Polarion also supports managing the changes because it stores a full history of all changes. So for example, if we go to the document of this Annex A and see all the changes that have been taking place just recently, so let's compare the latest 2 revisions here. And let's now look at what happened in the work items. We see that this is the one that was changed, and it clearly indicates the change here. If we want to see all the changes that took place during this demo, we can also do that. Focusing on work items again. We see all the changes that took place during this demonstration. Conclusions. If this is the traditional way of doing, then these are the opportunities that Polarion gives you. Of course, there's more, like in any good sales pitch. So these are the process areas that we already looked at. But of course, it's quite possible to manage the supply chain and RFQs towards the suppliers. On the right-hand side of the V model, it's possible to use the quality assurance features, and there are also other processes that can be supported. And looking at the projects from the customers or facility owners' point of view, it's of course possible to gather requirements and specifications and issue those ITTs with Polarion. This is about the last mentioned process area. Equinar in Norway. This is not our customer, but it's a reference in the Nordics. They used to manage requirements with documents and Excels with a document management solution, and there were some challenges, for example, causing significant revenue loss. And now they are using Polarion, migrated some of the documents into Polarion, and this is really a business value that they are getting out of that. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. This was a very fast overview of some process areas and use cases. We are more than happy to answer any of your questions, so feel free to contact us. Thanks for watching.